This is the Severn Valley Railway, which runs alongside a stretch of the Severn River between Kidderminster and Bridgnorth in the West Midlands of England. There are only a few preserved steam railways like this operating in Britain, and all of them are privately run, relying heavily on the help of enthusiasts who drive the trains, operate the signals, and draw up the timetables. A timetable has to suit passenger demand, but it has another very important function: to ensure safety. This is especially important on single-track sections of line, like those on the Severn Valley Railway. If two trains collide, the consequences can be disastrous.
Five people have died in a train crash in Kent. Two trains collided in thick fog on a single-track line.
Collisions on a single track are rare, but nevertheless a very real danger. Even in the 90s, trains have come to grief, despite what are thought to be fail-safe precautions.
The two trains collided head-on in thick fog while travelling on the single-track line. It's thought both were running late, and there's evidence that one at least skidded as it tried to brake before the impact. The collision shattered the front diesel units. The two drivers are understood to be amongst the fatalities.
In common with other railway lines, the Severn Valley Railway has to maintain strict safety rules. There are speed limits. Here, it's 10 miles per hour. And the signals indicate whether or not it's safe to proceed. There would be no problem in running just one train on one line, but as soon as there are two or more trains running at a time, they have to be able to pass. So you need to make use of locations, such as stations, where the line becomes double track. Bridgnorth and Kidderminster both lie on the valley of the River Severn, and the two are connected by 24.5 kilometres of railway line. The line starts on one side of the river before crossing over a bridge to the other side. The line also goes through a tunnel outside Kidderminster. Trains are able to pass one another at a number of intermediate stations along the largely single-track line. A train not only waits at a station platform to allow passengers to get on and off, it may also have to wait for the line ahead to be clear. This train is having to wait for a train travelling from the other direction to arrive at the station before it can proceed. Efficient timetabling should ensure that no train is held up unduly. In order to investigate this further, I went to Bridgnorth and boarded a train for Kidderminster with Keith Shaw, who has responsibility for timetabling the service. The first stop was to be at Hampton Load, one of several stations and potential passing places on the way. Like all good railway supervisors, Keith is armed with a stopwatch.
9 o'clock, right on time.
Slowly but surely, the train gets up steam, but its departure time is being noted for a reason. Could you tell us what you're doing today?
Well, we're just checking the times of the trains in order to compose the timetable. We've just left Bridgnorth now pretty well on time. We've had some difficulty starting, as you'll have noticed, but that's something that maybe we have to take into account in the timetable.
Do you have problems with trains being late?
No, not too bad. On the other hand, it is important that we don't just sit back and look at the timetable and say, well, that's it forever.
So let's look at some of the local landmarks and key places that affect the journey time. The train has reached a place called Stearns, just over halfway to Hampton Load, where there's a danger of the line slipping into the river, and so there's a speed restriction, or slack, of 5 miles per hour.
it's 9:15. We've just passed the slack at Stern. And as this is only a one-coach train, of course, it doesn't take us long to pass it. But if you've got 8 or 9 coaches on, the whole of the train would have to pass the short section. Just make a note of that.
The particular train on which we're travelling only needs to have one coach because it's the early morning taxi for railway personnel.
Right, we're approaching Hampton Load now, and at Hampton Load there's a very interesting ferry. And there's a ferry across the river which has no power, no motive power. It's driven by the current of the river, and it's 2 very elderly ladies operating it. And if you want to cross, you go and push a button on a pole, and they come out of their house and get in the boat, and it's anchored to a wire which runs across the river. And by manipulating the rudder, they can use the current to drive the boat across or back. It's quite fun. And occasionally, when in the Singleman at Hampton Road, I use the ferry. Park the car on the other side of the river and come across, which is quite nice. It's quite a nice feature. Just approaching Hampton Load station now, so we need to check the time. It's just 9:20.
So that's the journey as far as Hampton Load, a distance of 7.2 kilometres. And we arrived at 9:20. A useful way to represent a journey is to draw a position time graph, marking positions on the vertical axis with BN for Bridgnorth and HL for Hampton Load. The horizontal time axis is divided into equal time intervals, starting at 9 o'clock when the journey began, up to 9:20 when we reached Hampton Load. The graph of the trip from Bridgnorth to Hampton Load looks like this. Up until 9 o'clock, the train was stationary at Bridgnorth, and so the graph is horizontal. As it's speeded up, the graph gets steeper. At about 6 minutes past 9, the train had settled to a constant speed for a period of 5 to 6 minutes. But then it slowed down to enter the cutting at Stearns, where there's a speed limit. Let's mark the position of Stearns on the vertical axis. At 9:16, once the train had passed through Stearns, the graph gets steeper again as the train speeded up, until it finally slowed down as it approached Hampton Load station, where it stopped at 9:20. The next part of the journey took us beyond Hampton Load to Highley station, along another 3.3 kilometres of single-track railway. There were a number of factors which affected our speed. So where are we now, Keith?
Well, we're just past Alveley sidings. We're approaching Highley. We've come over Highley Bank, which is quite a steep gradient, and it's reverse curves. That's curves in one direction and the other, which makes for increased friction, which makes it more difficult for the driver. And so we should be approaching Highley soon. Of course, in the opposite direction, the gradient works in the driver's favour, so it's important that he keeps the speed restriction in that direction as well. Slowing now for Highley. I'll check the time, and 9:27.
After Highley, there's Arley station, a further 3.5 kilometres up the line, which we reached at 9:36. 1 kilometre beyond Arley, the line crosses over to the other bank of the river.
Well, that's 9:40. We're just crossing Victoria Bridge, which when it was built in 1861 was the largest single-span iron structure ever built at that time by a firm called John Fowler, and it's 200 feet single-span. Now on the faster section of the line, it doesn't have so many slacks on as the earlier part, and also of course by now the engine's warmed up and things are running much more as they should do.
There's one more stop before Kidderminster, and that's in the town of Bewdley. To To get to Bewdley Station, we've travelled a total of 20 kilometres from Bridgnorth and arrived at 9:50. The next landmark was the tunnel.
Well, we're just approaching Bewdley Tunnel now. This is another timing point. It'll be 9:56. The engine, of course, whistle when they go in to warn anyone who's inside that there's a train coming, because there's no way maintenance staff might be on the ground in the tunnel or doing some work, and they need to know to get out of the way. There are little niches in the side of the tunnel which you can stand if the train comes by, so, but they still need to be warned.
The tunnel was the last timing Keith made before we reached our final destination, Kidderminster town. On the outskirts of Kidderminster, the single track becomes double again. Our final arrival time, 10:10.